Notifications. We get a lot of them. And they can be really handy to bring something important to your attention. But with more and more devices and apps that are calling out to us, it can get noisy and confusing and overwhelming, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of notifications in the first place, right? This is absolutely the case on a day-to-day in our business and personal lives, but particularly in healthcare. Well, in this episode today, I speak to David Pare, Chief Technology Officer at Olinqua, who are helping hospitals optimize their workforce, healthcare and patient outcomes with unified communication, location, and mobility solutions. In this episode, we talk about operational workflows in hospitals, alarm fatigue in healthcare, and the importance of integrations and partnerships amongst healthcare technology, and a lot more too. Collaboration starts with a conversation, Team HealthTech. Let's make it happen. This is Talking HealthTech with me, Peter Birch, featuring content and community about technology in healthcare. David, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Nice to be here.
Well, thank you for inviting me into the Olinqua, we'll call it the Olinqua studio today, but the Olinqua office up here
I like that,
across in
yeah.
Perth. But maybe I have to leave some of the gear here to give you a little studio for afterwards. But look, to set the context, tell us a bit about you and your background firstly.
Yeah, sure. I joined Olinqua around June, so like 4 or 5 months ago. Okay. So before that, just to give a little background where I come from, I was the CTO for healthcare and life sciences for DXC, for ANZ for about 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
And then DXC sold their healthcare business to a big European company called the Dallas. So I ran a software product team of about 300 people, 20 products, 15 countries for about 2 years, just before I came here to take over. And some of my responsibility as part of CTO is everything product related to engineering, as well as product strategy and thought leadership.
Got it.
So really fun.
Yeah, excellent. And so Olinqua, last time we spoke to someone from Olinqua, we had Arthur on the show a while ago. So it's been probably over 12 months. Talk to me about what's been keeping the business busy, over the past 12 months.
It's a big 12 months. Because remember, like probably 2 years ago, as of 2 years ago, there's about 10 people in the company, and we grew for about 18 months for about 50.
Wow.
So it's a massive, massive growth in the company. So we're really doubling down into creating a better product, more feature, better serve our customers, really. So this is more, and me coming in around organizing and structuring the work a bit more, so make sure that we kind of, get the best of our team and then to our customers, basically.
Yeah. And so what would you say has been the core of some of the work that's been going on with Olinqua at the moment?
Well, I mean, we have a platform that's been in the market for about 10 years. So part of it is making sure the platform can scale to bigger, broader things, because we're looking at the US, for instance, and other markets.
Yep.
And part of it is just refocusing on what else is the market in needs. And, we started very focused on alarm management, for instance, and integration. And we're moving into things like incidents and task management and the rest and some stuff like that. So,
yeah. So this point around alarms, there's a lot of things that make noise in a hospital, and a lot of, the attention of a frontline healthcare worker is often sought after. Talk to me a bit about how you think about, these challenges I'll go back one. The current state of alarms and notifications and things that go bing within a hospital setting. What are hospitals dealing with at the moment?
It's pretty bad. I was reading actually last week a report, and they say that for another hospital in the US and then around Australia, it's a similar things, between 70 and 100 alarms per day per patient in a hospital.
Wow. Okay.
So that could be thousands of alarms per day across the whole board. And that includes operational and clinical alarms. So you need to separate the two. One is things like your blood pressure and your EKG monitor and those things, SpO2 level, little thing you put in your finger, that go beep. That's very clinical. Yes. We tend to focus more on the operational side. So things like the fire panel, the nurse call. So, the big red button on the red, so better press that. Fire alarms, security, could be the helipad alarm, the helicopters coming up.
Yep.
The temperature of fridges is going down or up.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that doesn't go down. So today the issue is there are a plethora of systems, and there's more and more of them in the future. So you end up with a system for the building management stuff. There's a system for the nurse call. There's a system for the fire panel, and there's another one for the pager and one for the duress. And you end up with 5, 6, and 10 systems, and they're not integrated. So what happens is you get an alarm on your SMS, you get an alarm on an app, you get an alarm on a pager, and they're very simple things. So they do very simple, basic things like, oh, here's an alarm, I'm going to send a message here, and that's it. So it's quite difficult for operational people to go around and know where to go, where to look, what to do, because it's all very manual and they're all very siloed across the different systems.
Yeah.
So,
And so this is the space that you play in with Olinqua. So is part of your role to try and bring some of these disparate systems together, or is it to just overlay everything and do everything? How do you kind of approach that, given there's so many different things happening? How do you consolidate it?
yeah, well, that's part of our claim to fame, really. A lot of the competitors actually have a play of closed ecosystem. So you go in and you buy all my stuff and I'll do everything. But that's not reality. It doesn't work like that in real life, because we work like with builders, for instance, and there's no one does everything.
Yes.
Even if you wanted to, it'd be price prohibitive anyway.
Yeah.
So what we do is we play with everyone. So we come in and we do the integration of all the back-end operational stuff, the hard stuff, because remember some of these like pager legacy systems, some of them is not even IP, not even digital. It's like analog, right? Some of these fire panels are 30 years old. They don't even, even the new buildings are built with old technology, because these haven't evolved in 25 years.
Yeah.
So what we do is we talk the old, crappy, difficult language of protocols, and we integrate all that, and then we provide a single place for all that data to come in, and then we can trigger the alarms in different channels depending on what you do. Like, could be on your SMS, could be on your phone, could be an in-app message, could be on a SpectraLink phone on the bedside, like these little weird phones that the nurses go around with in the hospital, things like that. So we kind of broker all this, make it as simple. We lower the cost because we can play with everyone. We don't have to build all our stuff. We can play with everyone. And then once you aggregate all that data, you end up with a very good view of all the operational side of the hospital, what's happening around the alarms, which is pretty cool.
Got it. So it's kind of like putting a skin over the top almost of, you've got all the things existing and operating, but then to bring it all onto the same level and to see it all properly, that's where you guys.
Yeah, pretty much actually. Yeah, and people don't think about this, because you go to a hospital, you care about your patient care and the clinical stuff. You don't think about what's happening in the background. Well, if there's a fire and you don't know, then that's a problem. If there's getting attacked in the ward, you need to know, like, some basic things. If there's a spoil and it's not clean, or there's a something weird happening, you need to make sure all this happens and it's getting taken care of. Otherwise, your care not gonna work.
And it's the those things that are low frequency but high, like a big issue when they actually happen. So the occasional actual fire alarm that you have that's legitimate, that if you don't hear it every day. So if there's a failure, if it doesn't work properly, then it's a big issue when something actually does happen. So ensuring that these things are right up front, it makes for the whole experience.
But remember though, just on that point, remember that there's hundreds and hundreds of these little things in the hospital that go bing, from the air conditioning temperature to the vaccine fridge temperature to the fire panel, and they all have some kind of threshold of when something happens to just pop an event, which may be acute or not. It could be just a warning. But per day, there'll be hundreds of those. We've got thousands of these alarms popping up everywhere. So it's not like random events would be someone coming in with a knife or a gun. But otherwise, there's a lot of like milder alarms, if you will, happening all the time, every day.
Yeah, got it. And I guess with those, you want to make sure that you're not just contributing to the noise, you're alerting people to things that actually, it's not just so you know the fridge is still okay. It's, like things that are actually need action and attention, right?
You're absolutely right. And that's the added value. So the basic part is the alarm, we integrate stuff as the basic, and then trigger an alarm. That's easy. That's what most people do. But what do you do with that alarm? That's what gets interesting. Like I brought this for just so you can see. This is like this is a duress tag. So a nurse would walk with this. If you get aggressed, you just press a button, and that triggers an alarm. Yeah. But that alarm is interpreted in the system as a code black, which is an aggression. Something's happening, and it sends security. So it triggers a workflow, calls security, and go and do something.
Got it.
Right. So this is where it gets interesting, because some of these incidents have different. There's a code blue, which is a medical emergency. So what does happen when something happens? A patient crashes, something happens. there's a MET team called MET, so MET team, medical emergency team, which is already configured in the system. And then what happens is triggers, they get all, either on their phone or somewhere, some kind of, like, I'll take it, I'll go, and they all go and do what they have to do for your care. So you can trigger out and manage your workflows at different levels. This is where the value gets really interesting, because you actually, or if there's a spill on the floor of something, then send a cleaner. So there's a task going out and going to move that patient, or go clean this, or go and move that patient from here to here.
Yeah.
So to help with the flow of patients in the hospital. So we'll get a bit more kind of sophisticated in what we do with the alarms.
Yeah. I don't think I've heard, it's not too often you hear a CTO or someone more focused on the technology side speak so much about workflow, that sounds like it's really important for you, then understanding not just how the thing works and make sure it works properly, but how people use the platform as well.
It's what we do, right? So the product I'm building is useless if users are not using it, if they only use it if it solves the problem that they have, right? So with my product team really focus on, like, let's be passionate about the problems so we can solve them rather than the feature, because the feature is important, but it's not, if it doesn't solve the problem, it's useless.
Yeah. And so with all of those different systems that you're integrating with and pulling information up, as talking the technology side for a second, do you need to bring those all into a new standard format, or like what is behind the scenes? If we pulled the curtain back and looking at how you're actually connecting all these bits and pieces, how does that actually all kind of work?
That's a good question, because that's that's part of where we want to go in the future, because there's no unique standards today for all these things, right? And that's something that's required. So we build our own internal standard, if you will. So we have adapters that connect to all these things, hundreds of different systems. It converts it to our own standard, and that's how we store the data in our database. And then from there, then you can trigger what you want based on the workflow you want, business rules you want based on that. So unfortunately, there's there's nothing there in the future that exists today, but what we're aiming to do potentially in the future, we could open source that standard we created for others that could use it and benefit from it.
Yeah, because there's standards around patient information, even though there's different levels of standards and fire standard, HL7 and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to just those general notifications and alarms and systems that come out, that's irrelevant to that area, right?
No, there's nothing. Look, like the fire panels use like serial cable, like you had in the 90s, connecting your printer with there's nothing there. These things are 30 years old. They don't care.
Yeah, right, exactly. And from your side then, looking at we talked a little bit about the future, about what that would be one area, and looking at how to then make this standardized information public. But what's on the horizon? What's on the roadmap for you and Olinqua in building out the products? What can we look forward to seeing in 2023 and beyond?
Well, one of the biggest things we're working on is this role-based directory, which allows you to, when you trigger these incidents, for instance, in these more sophisticated elements based on the alarms, either a task or an incident or a message, it's role-based, meaning that it could go to you, Peter, as a doctor, or it could go to a doctor on call or on duty, which happens to you, Peter, at that point in time. Or I want to have a task sent out to all the cardiology registrars on duty on this floor. So then you get a lot more sophisticated into what you do, because sometimes what happens is not a lot of people actually named in these hospital, right? So it's just a role. I need to talk to the guy on call, the girl on call now. Who is she? Who is he? That's very difficult to know, because this information is in a spreadsheet somewhere. It's in maybe an on-call rostering system. Maybe it's a spreadsheet. Maybe it's in a Active Directory.
Yeah.
So we need to consolidate all that information into a single source of truth, and we can trigger events based on that. So that goes as much for task and incident. It would be for like a conversation or group chat, for instance. You can have all the people on duty or the different types of clinicians who want to chat, like they do in WhatsApp today, on a more like safe place, if you will. The other thing we're doing as well is right now a lot of our customers, we have about 100 customers in Australia. Most of them are on premise. And we're starting to see a shift into cloud. More like we do SaaS on-prem, but it's a bit more of a hybrid model.
Yep.
But right now, we for instance, Vic Heart in the hospital in Victoria, we 100% cloud. The whole hospital is cloud first, which means there's no infrastructure locally except for the minimal basic stuff. So all that stuff is hosted on Azure, for instance. And we're starting to see a shift a bit more on an acceptance and a recognition. You know what? Cloud can actually work for mission critical, and it can work for healthcare. Obviously, the biggest issue is, well, what happens if the cloud is not available because my network failed? Sure. That's less valuable for the city, but if you're a rural area, that will happen for sure. So the way we cater for this is having an edge appliance on the infrastructure of the hospital. So if something happens with the connection to the cloud, you can still connect to your application on premise, but in a more smaller, cheaper way, if you will.
Yeah. And does that open up then for opportunities to do things outside of the hospital walls as well? Like, so with virtual care and all those kind of bits and pieces, do you play a role in that kind of stuff too?
Yeah, completely. I mean, that we see the big push around hospital, the homes, and most. What it's funny because people, and actually my previous role was all about out of hospital care, so I know quite a bit about that space. Yeah. So the funding is all through primary care. But if you look at who's actually doing the work, who will coordinate that care in the future, is hospitals. They're the ones providing in-home, either medi-hotels or hospital in the home, or they all have different names for it. And they basically provide you a bunch of devices at the home. You can monitor you, and get a nurse to go to your home. So it'd be the same. It'd be an extension to the hospitals. In this scenario, we could do the same thing and just trigger and monitor all the alarms in the home, and raise events or incidents for something to go and do something based on that.
Yeah.
Another big use case is aged care. Since the Royal Commission, there's a lot of issues, and now they have actually every aged care facilities. They have to have measures, things like how many minutes are we spending with each resident every day?
Right.
So how do you do that? Well, you need to monitor, and then we move into kind of a bit of another part that we play in, which is things like asset tracking and people tracking. So you need a bit of an infrastructure to do that, but then once you have the infrastructure in place, like I'm going to technical here, but like BLE and like low energy Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or lower WAN. So these new protocols allow you to track at different levels of accuracy, either people or things. So in this case, in aged care, you could put some sensors around, and you would know when the person comes in the room, gets out of the room, and monitor, wandering and all kinds of different use cases on that.
Yeah, because you couldn't rely on somebody constantly logging that kind of information. So having that kind of technology that works behind the scenes to be able to capture that information with confidence, it would be pretty important. I'm just thinking, you mentioned that you've got something like 100 customers here in Australia and beyond that, and looking at different settings, not just in the typical healthcare environment. I'm thinking about implementations here. Like you say, some facilities have spreadsheets and different Active Directories and all these different systems. So this implementation side, it's, even though you mentioned there's a SaaS kind of model, which brings to mind in other industries kind of just, do your own onboarding and away you go. I would think the implementation side would be quite hands-on from your side and looking at getting hospitals set up. How do you work with these systems that have all these hospital settings that have all these disparate systems and all that, and bring them all together into that one kind of way? I assume that implementation side is quite lengthy.
It all depends on the complexity, obviously. If you have, like, if you take Westmead, for instance, in New South Wales, we integrated 49 systems for them, right? Wow. That's quite a lot. Yeah. It's quite a unique case. But remember, we're a channel first partner company. So we for the foremost, we build software, and we have partners who go and implement. We also do a lot of implementation ourselves. But in the future, we're moving more and more a space where others will implement our technologies to give us more scale, if you will. So the rest, once you have the infrastructure in place, the software is not that difficult because connectors exist. It's more configuring. And it's mostly a business analyst kind of function where you need to go and sit down with the hospital, various teams, and go, right. So your medical emergency team, how do they roll? What's the business rule? When do you want to raise it? When you monitor fridges for the temperature in the fridges, what's the threshold? So that fridge is for vaccines. This one is for that kind of medication. What is the low and high threshold? So we can raise an alarm. And when I raise an alarm, what do? Who is it we go to? So all these little things is more like workshopping with them how they're going to configure the application and how they're going to use it. So we make it seamless for them when they actually go and use it. Because if you're a nurse, you don't care. You just want to I don't want my job, right? Yeah. The rest is all configured in the back end.
Got it. And lastly, then, thinking about, hospital settings that might be thinking about, the need to engage with Olinqua to set up some of these systems, should they, but, it sounds like there's a good amount of knowledge they need about, how people want to be notified and when, should hospital settings reach out to Olinqua to start, should hospital settings start thinking about all this stuff before they come to you? When's the right time to come to Olinqua and start to, plan some of these things out?
All the time.
All the time.
Anytime. Come to us anytime.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm laughing, but I joined only a few months ago. But what I found out is there's a lot of very deep technical expertise in this company, and I haven't done it 100 times. It helps kind of we pretty much know what to do and how to deal with some of these challenges that we're faced. And we have big partners as well that play with us. Like we're an Apple certified organization, so it allows us to get access to certain features of the phone, for instance. We won the Australian Microsoft Launchpad last year, which is a global program, in Australia. So now we have basically access to their offices in San Francisco. And then my founder was there a couple of weeks ago, just go and chat, and it gives access to investors and people and knowledge and credits and all kinds of things. So it allows us to do some funky things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, look, David, I appreciate you making the time and having a chat here. We'll put the details for Olinqua in the show notes of this episode for people to check out and learn more about the stuff that you do. I'm looking forward to spending more time with the team now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For more content and community about technology and healthcare, visit talkinghealthtech.com.